sleeplessness, and fever. Throughout our presentations, do keep this in mind whenever our brothers and sisters, be it anywhere in the world, when they're persecuted, when they're suffering, we are also suffering. I'm going to define genocide as it's universally pretty much accepted. So genocide is any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. It is safe to say that this pretty much describes the genocidal crimes that have been taking place against our brothers and sisters, which we will be focusing upon today. So Muslims are no strangers to persecution and genocide throughout history up until right now. This is not an exhaustive list you see of list of crimes and genocide, and I'm telling you right now that I will not do justice to all this, but it's very important to highlight some of these. So we have the expulsion of the Muslims of Spain, starting from the late 1400s up until the early 1600s. Up until the early 1600s, there was not one Muslim left. And think about this, and its height in Muslim Spain, there used to be 5 million Muslims that made up Al-Andalus. Just think about that. So we had a Holocaust on our hands at the end of Muslim Spain, and this is actually admitted by a contemporary, a Portuguese Dominican monk by the name of Damien Francesca. He basically called the genocide of the Muslims a Holocaust. He termed it an agreeable Holocaust. We also have the genocide of the Muslims of Cambodia. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but a lot of Muslims weren't even aware that there was a genocide that took place against the Muslims of Cambodia. This was in the late 70s. 500,000 of our brothers and sisters were basically taken off the map of Cambodia. And now, recently, there have been trials going on, and there have been some of the perpetrators of this genocide that have been prosecuted. We also have the genocide in Algeria of our Muslim brothers and sisters by the French colonialists. And I'm only mentioning when this took place in the late 1800s. Over 825,000 of our Muslim brothers and sisters in Algeria were killed off by the French colonialists. And this is not mentioning the atrocities that the French colonialists had committed later on in the 1900s up until around the 1950s. We have the persecution of the Muslims in the Philippines, which a lot of our Muslims are not even aware of. This goes back to the American colonialists when they ruled the Philippines. There was an incident called the Moro Massacre, where the American colonialists had basically eliminated an entire Muslim village of 1,000. Just imagine this. And these were defenseless men, women, and children that they had killed. And actually, one of the governors, the colonialist governors at that time, was Major Hugh Scott, and he said that he admitted to this genocide, and he basically said that the Muslims there declared they had no intention of fighting. They just ran up to their mountainous village in fright. And not only that, but the American colonialist soldiers who committed this massacre, they took a picture with the bodies of their victims. And you can find it yourself. This is Wikipedia, a Wikipedia moral crater, and you actually can see that picture. I didn't show it because it would not be appropriate. Also, we have the genocide of Tatarstan of our Muslim brothers by the USSR regime back in the early 1920s. And this was through famine. So basically, through famine, they had killed off 500,000 of our Muslim brothers and sisters through man-made famine. And now, recent studies show that now the number is up to 2 million. And I just want to share, this was chronicled by the Human Rights Watch, Where this woman, during this genocide, using famine, this is what she said: "We were forced to repair our own individual tents. We worked and we starved. Many were so weak from hunger that they could not stay on their feet. Sometimes the bodies lay among us for several days. Some of the children dug little graves and buried the unfortunate little ones," which is basically the babies. We also have the persecution of Muslims in Bulgaria. Now, this is very telling. This was a few years before the Bosnian genocide took place. This was in 1989. What had happened was, this is very similar to what's happening to the Uyghur Muslim community in China. They were committing forced assimilations. Thousands were killed. The Muslims in Bulgaria were forced to change their names. They were forced to eat pork, alcohol. What ended up happening was in 1989, over 300,000 Muslims had to basically leave Bulgaria because of the situation. And we know the continued carnage of Palestine and Syria and Yemen, and it goes on. And again, I haven't done justice to any of this, but I need to highlight this, that we're no stranger to persecution and genocide. As many of you know, this is a map of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and where a brutal genocide took place in the early 1990s. Again, I'm not going to do justice to this in my part of the presentation, but I do want to provide some context to what happened here. So until the late 80s, Serbian nationalists had taken over the Central Yugoslav government. Ever since then, Yugoslavia was made of 6 republics. They started to offer independence and started seceding from the rump Yugoslavia. Bosnia and Herzegovina actually, at the advice of the European Committee, held a referendum for independence. Over 99.4% of the people of Bosnia opted for independence, and there was a 63% turnout for the referendum. After Bosnia and Herzegovina was declared an independent country, entire villages of Muslims. This was one of the most horrendous crimes I ever had as a young child, a young student at university that I had observed. And I'd like to share some, again, and we'll get into the details during discussion with you, but I do want to share some pictures of tragedy from the Bosnian war. This is a child, 4-year-old, who was treated in the Sarajevo Children's Hospital for burns suffered by Serbian attacks. I want to mention is that out of the hundreds of thousands of people, mostly Muslims that were killed in Bosnia, of them 12,000 were children. There were the Serb nationalists also had set up concentration camps for a slow annihilation of our Muslim brothers and sisters. They were set up in a few towns, such as Banja Luka, this is in Manjaka. These are more pictures of the children victims of the Serbian attacks. In Sarajevo alone, there were 1,600 children that were killed. 600 of them were killed by snipers, by Serbian snipers in Sarajevo. This is a picture of a body of someone who fell victim to a Serb sniper in Sarajevo. These are more pictures from the concentration camps. Again, this is from the Manjaka concentration camp near Prijedor. That's another picture. This is the grave site of the victims of genocide. This actually was a place where the 1984 Winter Olympics took place. Now, what happened was later on in the war, Croatian nationalists also started committing very horrendous crimes against the Muslims. Because this was an attack on the Vitez district, where Bosnian Muslims fell victim to the Croat nationalists. and this was in April of 1993. Now, after I observed this, I said, okay, come on, the world cannot tolerate another horrendous genocide. I was hopeful. I was very naive back then. But lo and behold, we had the genocide that took place, which we all know of, against our brothers and sisters in Burma, which Brother Anwar will talk more about. Before the 1970s, there were 2 million Muslim Rohingya in Burma, and guess what? There's only a few hundred thousand left. Just imagine that. The push and the expelling and the rapes and the crimes they were committing against our brothers and sisters. This is horrendous. And I'm gonna, I want to show some witness accounts of this by the victims themselves, so if you can please listen to them.